All right. We're here again.
Let's do
Where
it.
are we starting? What is our first
Let's,
topic?
well, we've got this great question. What are your 1 to 3 greatest learnings or insights regarding the topic at hand, which I'm assuming is complexity and participatory design, that you would like to share? So I'm gonna put that to you. Let's kick us off.
This is a really hard question for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk
Do
about
tell.
why,
Mm-hmm.
but we even talked a little bit about
Do
this
tell.
before we hit record. Um, I spent a little time trying to actually think about, okay, what are learnings that I've acquired or experienced that I would then want to share with others. And there are lots of things I've learned, and there are lots of things that I'm happy to share as far as perspectives that I've gained. But like, I'm really struggling to think of things that I have quote learned that I would then want to pull out of the context of the work or the collaboration in which those learnings happened, and then share them. Not because I'm so itchy about things being abstracted and used as case studies or recipes. This isn't that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me, I'm like trying to figure out, like, why is this so strange to me? Is this just asking for principles, which we've kind of already talked about
Mm-hmm.
now? Maybe to an extent that's true. And then it hit me that I think this is hard because this is conceiving of learnings as nouns, things that
Mm.
I have learned, and that just doesn't compute for me. I need it to be there. It's a verb for me. It's an ongoing, continuous verb for me.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way that I swear I'm not trying to just, you know, punt slash jujitsu slash whatever my way out of this. I want to hear your answer
Well,
because
what if
you
it's a point in
probably
time verb?
a point in time verb is a verb that's been nailed to the XY graph and it's no longer a verb. I wonder though, like, so
Snapshot verb.
there are probably some things that I can think of, but I want to hear yours because I know
Okay.
you've got more robust thinking about this. I think you've done reflection to this end in a way that I haven't. So let's talk about where your instinct goes and compare, and then something you share might make me go, oh yeah, this that. But the reason I didn't just say you go first, Kyle, and I actually wanted to share that is because I know
Okay.
probably hearing me say that might be
I
helpful for some people.
for better or for worse, I tend to like not move forward on something until I feel like I've got a little bit of a handle on it. But for me to have a handle on it, I need to move forward on it. So it's always a imbalance moment. It's a big aha moment when I realize, oh, I was moving in the wrong direction, or I didn't have a handle on it. So that's when I feel like it's a learning because I have to drop it at some
I
point.
see. So you're
So it
thinking about
is,
it as, oh, okay, time to make our little, whatever you call it, our pivot, our reframe, our,
right.
yeah, okay. Mhm.
Gravity shifts in my moments of pivots of learning
Yep.
because I'm not in a static position at any point. I'm If I'm static, it's because don't feel like I've started moving. But there are moments that I've moved through this that I've said, "Oh shit, that's not it. I'm ready to pivot now." And
Mm.
one of those was, and I think I didn't have the language to articulate. I wasn't talking about complexity 20 years ago, but I was talking about music and making music and collaboration and all of that sort of stuff, which was a whole different language talking about the entire thing, a whole different lexicon that's talked about complexity. And then I started dipping my head into this space and changing my lexicon. And the first thing we do it when we go to every conference and we learn something new, we go back home and we regurgitate what we learn, but we're parroting it. We're not necessarily relating or abstracting into our own experiences yet.
Mhm.
And it took me a little bit to have that, like, aha, I get this. And
Mhm.
so I was trying to explain to people other people's definition of what complexity was as if it was this scientific force. It was like this negative entropy sort of concept.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me probably 2 years before I had this aha of like, and it was probably tripping over Nora Bateson's work before I went, oh yeah, it's like meeting new people. That's what complexity is. It's sitting across the table from people and having a conversation. It's putting the toddler's shoes on in the morning. It's and then relating it to like it's jamming with other musicians. It's negotiating traffic. I wrote a whole massive blog or a Substack article of just like silly quips of like all of the ridiculous, banal minutiae of moments in life that are complexity that we take for granted, that we are intimate with on a daily basis. So that was a little bit of an aha that I guess I had to relearn because I got so, I don't know, maybe enthralled by this new world. And I kind of had to be re-humbled by, yes, there's something cool here. It was kind of, I don't know. I guess you do that with like when I started learning, even like music and sound engineering and all that sort of stuff. You start to like you learn how the sausage gets made.
Yeah.
You learn a little bit about music theory and you learn about sound engineering and all of this sort of all of the stuff that goes into production. You kind of just need to sit back and like listen to Nick Drake and go, oh, the guy's just a great songwriter. Like, I don't know how he does it, but it's just gorgeous. I don't give a shit what kind of microphone they use or who produced this or what label it's on. I don't care about any of that sort of stuff. It's just beautiful. And so like, that's the kind of, you gotta like step back and be in it at a different level at some point. So that would be my first one.
Okay, that's really good and helpful for me because like hearing you kind of give an example of hello.
Oh no.
It's all good. It's all good. You want to I was going to say we can pause and cut. You can like unmute.
Okay. Something amazing is happening outside, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's helpful if we put the enabling constraint around this question that is,
Uh-huh.
okay, think about it as those times you pivoted or the times you kind of walked down the street and ended up at a cul-de-sac and realized you got to back up out of that street or whatever kind of examples. One big one for me, and it's one that we did already kind of touch on in the live complexity lounge meetup, so I won't go back into it in a ton of detail, but it is the recognition of just how context dependent and emergent certain things are, that most of our lives we've been conditioned to think about as more innate or immutable traits or properties. Like at its most abstract level, that's to me, that's a huge learning. Specifically in the session, we talked about uncertainty tolerance and like some related things that have to do with the way we talk about humans and like why they can't or what would help them be better at, embracing complexity and things of that sort. And for me, without getting into a lot of the details there or rehashing what we said that day, I think the bigger, more abstracted learning that comes not just from figuring out how to engage better with complex adaptive systems, but also doing it in a highly participatory and, co-creative kind of way, is recognizing that almost everything, not everything, but almost everything that you assume is somewhat of a static or immutable kind of property is actually far more context dependent and often an emergent property rather than some innate driving property. And that little like flip is big. And it doesn't mean everything is like that. I mean, not everything is context dependent. Not everything is, emergent, but far more things than I think we recognize are. So understanding a certain personality trait in that way, understanding behavior in that way, understanding the aspects of organizational dynamics that, are more context dependent and emergent rather than something that is engineered or, core to something's DNA. Yeah, I guess I'll that'll be one of my, that's
like
submission number one for me.
Yeah. I think I hear Antoinette Carroll say this all the time. Anything we've that you can design, or anything, if everything's been designed, it can be redesigned.
Oh, I
Right?
struggle with this concept though.
Oh,
I'm
really?
so glad you brought this up. And David Graeber has another quote that's very similar. He's like, the one thing that I wish more people thought of was that, the world or the systems or whatever that we're part of have been designed and can be designed differently.
Hmm.
I I have like such a yes and no response to this. I mean, because
Mm.
like everything, there's nuance. Yes, to the extent that I know why you're conjuring this sentiment, but also no, because I think it risks that tricky assumption that this thing has been designed in the like omniscient designer, intelligent design sense that we
Intentional.
put into these systems, which,
Hmm.
is like fatal error that everybody kind of has to make on their journey into
Right.
systems and complexity, where they go, if
Yep.
I just get a broad enough view of the system, I can find the one magic lever or I can redesign the system. Like, good luck. We
Right.
won't belabor that. But I struggle because I love the David Graeber quote equivalent of that and use it so much. But I
Hmm.
know when I do it, there's that risk that someone goes, all we have to do is redesign capitalism and redesign the economic system and redesign social dynamics in the age of
Right.
gestures vaguely. So I struggle with that sentiment, but I don't
Fair.
know what other word to use besides design, other than to say that what we're all doing is trying to simply nudge and move the affordances that make something more likely to emerge. And that's our definition of design in both of those quotes.
Fair.
I don't know. What's
Yeah.
your take?
But I think it's fair. It's not a root cause that we need to identify. That you just once you find it, you just strike it out or remove it and replace it, and we win. Um, what you were what you were talking about though made me think of it. It makes me the way that I see that is I get to respect the heuristics that we've built, the sort of means that we've created that have generated the affordances that we have taken for granted. It gives me pause to
Yes.
notice all of these things, but
Yeah.
then also gives me the agency to know these things as things that we might be able to intersect with at some
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
Maybe at least acknowledge or acknowledge them as things that, well, that is a thing that exists that I might not be able to play with,
Yeah.
or who knows, discover the ones that we can play with.
It's funny because it's almost like we're just coming at that quote from the opposite ends of the
Right.
spectrum. If you're coming from a place where everything feels like it just is the way it is, it's both liberating and empowering to recognize
Right.
you can't necessarily engineer a system, but you absolutely have more agents than you might realize to affect, the modulators, the affordances, however you want to think about it. And yet at the same time, if you're coming from the other end and you see the word design and you know that that gets translated to systems engineering, so I love that. So we'll
Yeah.
meet in the middle, in the
Yeah.
place where both those
Fair enough.
quotes,
Right.
are exactly what we want them to be.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. All right.
And this goes right to what we talk about noticing all the time. This is
Yeah.
where the agency of noticing comes into play. Is just identifying conditions. It gives the at least presents opportunities.
Yeah.
Possible.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So
All right.
yes,
What's another learning? Do you have more?
I do. I've got a couple more. So
Okay, ask for three. 1 to 3.
1 to 3. So I've got I think I've got three here.
Oh,
Three.
this is great.
Probably you could kind of count what I just said as one. That what I consider what we do is making space to notice, to identify agency within a space, because we're not. I don't think it's the old systems thinking like we're finding leverage points and then we're going back. We're moving systems from point A to point B over 10 steps. Any of that kind of nonsense. But if
Mm.
we're creating space to notice, then we are inherently creating opportunity for people collectively and individually to find opportunity to change their conditions. And in small moves, that creates systems change. That's it.
Yeah,
And I say that's it as if it's like, it takes
that's it.
nothing and then it does nothing.
Simple as
But
that.
right, exactly. Um,
Question mark profit. Yes, that's it.
right.
3
Yes.
easy steps. Send
Yes. Underpants
$10
gnomes.
to my address now, and I will send you the catalog.
Yes. So that's you could call that one of them. The other big one was how to bring this into big organizations.
You have learnings on this? Lay it on us.
I've got a big one. So it started with the I'm going to like walk in and explain we're doing it wrong. Here's how you do it differently. Here's how all of that stuff failed. And
Hold on. I have to interrupt you. I've never really thought about this, but like the mental image of literally every single human who encounters either systems or then eventually complexity science becoming captain, you're doing it wrong.
oh
And
yeah,
you can find nice ways of saying that aren't just you're doing it wrong, but at the end of the day, you might still be captain, you're doing it wrong. And so this is
easily.
almost like, you remember the old commercials that would be on TV at the like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock hour, and they would say like, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? It
Yeah,
was like a
sure.
nice reminder, like
Yep.
pause. Also, like we could put aside for now, just hilarious and what an indicator of the time that was.
You're
But
right.
I feel like we all kind of just need a regular check-in and be like, are you being captain? You're doing it wrong. Like stop and stand back. And are you playing the role of you're doing it wrong? Because I feel like just recognizing when you are in that role or that is the posture you might have even accidentally taken up, you are absolutely countering your own
Shooting
goals.
myself in the
Anyway,
foot.
carry on. Yeah,
Yeah.
continue.
So, yeah. So I spent 20 years shooting myself in the foot, saying, "Let's do it differently."
Your help.
I can see. I just didn't have a good language for it. I was just the punk. I was just complaining, and I was also the "I told you so" guy from time to time as well.
Double whammy.
Or, yeah,
You're
or
doing
Captain
wrong.
Hind. Yeah,
And I told you so. You
right.
have
Captain
so many
Hindsight.
friends, I'm sure.
Oh
People
yeah.
loved you.
Well, I collected with the other.
The
You're doing
other,
it
you're doing it
wrong.
wrong.
Yeah, we all went to happy hour together,
Yes.
and we all commiserated together.
Yes. Yes.
We had a little club, and
Yep.
none of us got promoted together. We never got invited to big projects together. We were the
Yeah.
ones that,
Yeah.
we were the heretics. That was our club.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was. And we didn't have a good way of articulating anything. We just didn't like it, and
Yeah.
we tried to find creative ways of expressing that sort of thing. But man, when I started finding this stuff, the better I got at it. And service design was a good way of getting into that. So I could
Yeah.
start to like map out how you were doing it wrong.
Yep.
But man, picking up Dave Snowden's language on how you're doing it wrong, he knows how to explain how you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I started running with that. Nobody wanted to hear that either. So I really had to re-examine a bit. And luckily I had a lot of people around me that had a better language for that sort of thing. And some great coaches there that just said, tease people's interests, be a nerd, and there are plenty of nerds around you. See what nerds, collect. And then I started to learn about attractors. And I said, well, I'm going to try and eat my own dog food here. I am not going to push. That's Peter Sankey stuff. Let's try this attractor thing. And it worked. I just started going into Slack channels and dropping interesting articles and putting interesting meetups and talks in places and saying, I'm going to be there if anyone wants to jump in. And it took me 2 years of doing that. And before I knew it, 2, 3, 4, 5 people started showing up. Before I knew it, there was a meetup group or a community of practice within Capital One around complexity and systems. Before I knew it, people are reaching out and I've got projects. Before I knew it, I'm in a position where I'm now building the methodology and I've got a backlog of projects. And it's a thing now. It wasn't about you're doing it wrong. It was just about here's some interesting stuff. And where are people? Now I needed to, Slack was an affordance because going into a room of 6 people and being on a project was not it. I needed to be able to have a big broadcast to be able to just drop random things. But there were plenty of other nerds out there that were seeing interesting things, and being able to contextualize this in a couple of different ways. Things
Yeah.
are connected differently, and we need uncertainty tolerance in different ways, and uh, we need to understand. We need to work through innovation in ways that we've never worked before. Those were the message and people that resonated. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a
working
good one.
with attractors, being an attractor, going into a
Instead of
large
a
organization.
detractor.
That's it. Be the attractor. That's it.
Um,
Not the you're doing it wrong. Be the
be the
attractor.
attractor that you want to see in your system.
That's it.
Better if you're a strange attractor.
Right.
I love that one. And I think it's more, that's not a one. I mean, honestly, I think what you've just described is kind of one of the most overarching, I'm not even going to say principle, just a theme that I think runs through, a thread that runs through this like tapestry, no matter where you look at it. Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a couple different things you mentioned that I even just jotted down. But the thing that this is reminding me of is something that I've talked a lot about, but maybe not in the Complexity Lounge meetup live. So others who've maybe heard it, you can tune out for a minute. But I think that you have to almost, you said earlier about eat your own dog food, like you have to almost do that with what we know from complexity science with the people we're engaging with. And in some ways, it helps if you understand the idea of um, the dispositional state of the present, the current energy flow and energy gradients that exist. These are language that we use in complexity science. Not everybody uses them the same way, but these are things that I think ultimately eventually make their way into most people's understanding and vocabulary. And when you truly have understood and internalized that, it makes it easier to see that that also applies to the people you're collaborating with. So understanding the people, the individual humans that you are working with, as they are also full of these energy gradients, and they have, as individuals and as groups, they're an assemblage. They have a dispositional state. And so you have to work with the dispositional state of the present. And we're so used to applying that phraseology to systems and statuses and contexts and this company or this project or this initiative. It also applies to the humans and the way they relate to this kind of thinking. So understanding the current dispositional state of the people you're working with and finding ways to work with the energy of the system rather than against it. And when you think about, like you were saying earlier about, being captain, you're doing it wrong. And like even
Right.
Dave Snowden's language about describing and calling out what about a certain practice is ineffective or counterproductive. I also think you can use Dave and others' language in that same way, like I just described. He's often out there emphasizing the importance of understanding the flow of energy.
Mm-hmm.
We're abusing the physics terminology, but it's relevant here in this case because it's actually part of the physical science of a complex system. But there's definitely the notion that you've got to find the adjacent possibles for
Right.
the thing as it exists today. And everything you just talked through about going in and sharing links in Slack and just being a person around whom others can come and be curious. I think I said before, like I think about it being a safe space for what feels a little bit like dangerous or weird thinking.
Yeah.
Those are very concrete examples of how to actually do that. So I love that entire segment, and we should clip that and make that like a highlight for this, because I think
Cool.
that's something people crave hearing and understanding. And what it boils down to is whenever people ask, how do you earn the right to do these projects and how do you do the projects and they're missing a very important prologue, is that any level or type of project or collaboration that might employ these methods or this way of thinking or the science behind it all is always preceded by some level of community building. And it
Right.
doesn't have to be formal. We are community. We are this. We are that. It has to assemble in an organic way with the
Right.
seeding and the activities that you've just mentioned. And yes, you can do it in a little bit more deliberate and thoughtful way. And there's very, very good stuff out there about how to do it without making it too over engineered. A lot of good writing and thinking about communities of practice. But I am in the camp of others who will often say, communities of practice and natural organic forms of apprenticeship or bringing people together as a sort of social attractor um, is a lot more effective when it is organic and emergent and not over engineered. So
Yeah,
stimulated, maybe not engineered, over engineered. We'll say that.
exactly. And it's and I'm so glad you said seated too, because it's the number of times that I see that happen. Those conversations will happen, and it ends with somebody going, "Interesting, okay,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we'll talk again someday." And then like 6 months goes by, a year goes by,
Yep.
and somebody's in a talk and they go, "Oh, I had this conversation. I'll have to look up. Jen Brizelli's working on this interesting thing. You got to talk to her." Or I know a perfect person for this project. And it just happens
Yeah.
because you left an impression, or you introduced something that wasn't there before, but now it's relevant all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
so much of that was happening when I was just dropping things, or people were searching in Slack and now there's a record of it. And uh,
Mm-hmm.
somebody showed up at uh, one of those meetup groups or something, but
Mm-hmm.
now it's there. So the expectation of I'm waiting for that opportunity to get into that conversation, and now it's not working, and now I'm frustrated. I hear that all the time, and that's can't be the point.
Yeah.
This is kind of like I spend 10% of my week usually just having random conversations, coffee chats
Yeah.
about what are you working on, what's
Yeah.
interesting. Let's swap some notes. Let me introduce you to somebody else, because
Same.
we just need to sort of float some of this stuff, and we'll see where it goes and what happens.
Absolutely. I also find, and this maybe is getting a little tangential to our
Mm-hmm.
our overall, like we have a focus
Tangents
here.
are our middle
But
name.
I do hear from people sometimes, like what you just said. I spend a certain amount of my week like just talking to people, or I'll reach out to people cold on LinkedIn, or they reach out
Mm-hmm.
to me, or whatever. And when you describe that, I think for some people it triggers like networking. Oh,
Right.
I hate when you're doing networking. And to me, it's like not even remotely related to this conventional idea of networking. It's
Mm-mm.
literally just like, whoa, that person over there, or this person here, or this person who was in like some other meetup with me, and I just liked something they put in the chat.
Yep.
The barrier for me to reach out and be like, hey, I just interacted with you here, or we were in the same room, but you didn't even notice me, but you seem cool. Could we have virtual coffee together? The barrier for me to do that is not only zero, it's like negative. Like it's a downhill slope for me to slide right into that person's DMs.
Mm.
And does everybody respond? Of course not. But I think there's a level of anxiety in maybe more folks who might be listening to this than most others realize. First of all, it's a shared thing. Most people feel weird about it, but it's a muscle, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. And there are very, very humane, non-annoying ways to just say, hey,
Yep.
here's how we either interacted, or if I've never interacted with you, I just came across you. Your background looks super interesting. Would you be down to like chat sometime? And
Mm-hmm.
if you make it not a transactional like request, I'm not going to pick your brain.
Yeah,
It's more just like I'd love to compare notes.
that's
That's
it.
usually what I.
Yeah, I say I
And
swap
then sometimes
stories.
people say no, and some people do, and then
Right.
all of a sudden you're doing this.
So that is a perfect segue to my third learning, and then you owe us like one or two. I'm going to put you
No,
on the
I
spot
just
a little bit.
enhanced the one you just said. That checks the box for one of mine.
What? All right. So I'll get one more. Just,
Okay.
yeah. Perfect segue.
Okay.
So I'm gonna make a confession here, because um, my third one is I had to find my place in this space, and we were talking about this on a call earlier today. Um, I was a little intimidated reaching out to people. I see all the PhDs and all the academic status of folks in this space, and I was intimidated by that. I'm not intimidated by org charts at all. I have no problem going into uh, senior leadership and just shooting the shit and dressing down for it, and like I no problem at all. But for some reason, if I have to like spar wits with people, I don't want to hear all of the like references and the name dropping and all that sort of stuff. I can't play ball with that, but I can spitball and whatever. So that's where I start to get lost. But uh, it took me a few years before I realized my place is not on and this is nothing against the academic world. They didn't create my reluctance, my insecurity in this space.
It's a
So
you
nothing
problem,
against them
not
at
a them
all. But
problem.
what, what's that?
So this is a you problem, not a
This
them
was me
problem.
problem. This is none of them
Got
problem. But um, I needed to realize as a practitioner, I play a completely different role here. And that is it is a very different role. Um, it's not an either or. It's not anything that's measurable or comparable or anything like that. It's just something that's totally different. And it also, as a practitioner, I have something to offer. We all have something to offer as practitioners, as somebody that's in the field and doing and getting our hands dirty. And yes, the theory is absolutely important, and we have lots to learn from these folks that are doing all the name dropping and doing all the studying and poring over the tomes and doing the
Yeah.
Gandalf shit.
Yeah.
But like as the hobbits, we also are doing the shit as well, and we have a lot to offer in that space. And so it took me a while before I was able to reach out to some of these folks in this space and say, let's have that conversation. And it's been really liberating since then. And I call that a big learning because it was a big hump to get over, but also I've since I've started talking about that openly, I've had a number of people also reach out and go, I'm so glad you said that. I'm so intimidated by so many people that are out here. Please don't. Like, you will feel so much better. Just move forward past that. Like, you have a place here, and here's why. You're getting your hands dirty in a different way. And they are actually, as I'm talking to the folks that are working in schools, that are working in as consultants or in these think tanks or whatever, they are very curious as to what it looks like in the field. They want to
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
it is to run these workshops and have the conversations and be in the meetups. Like,
Yeah.
they need to hear it from the front line. And
Yeah.
so it's been very validating to have those conversations too.
It's funny, because actually now that as I hear you talk about this, like that, there's a version of this for me that is a learning. So I'll give an
Good.
answer that
All right.
that piggybacks on yours, and it's kind of the opposite end of it, which is I had to learn that other people are intimidated
Mm.
by this stuff,
Mhm.
by me sometimes, and I would say some of that learning for me is tied to working with complexity science, but it also goes back further for me. It goes back further in, my origins in the background of design, participatory design and otherwise, and even further back, not even to when I was teaching, but also before that, just being a kid who was a lover of learning and had to figure out how to not be seen as a know-it-all, because I never ever was like trying to share my knowledge or cram it down people's throats, but I was
Mhm.
enthusiastic. I was the kid who, as soon as I learned about something really cool, I really wanted to share it and tell people about
Yeah.
it. And you have to learn at a young age. Sometimes people do and sometimes people don't want to hear about it, and
Mm.
the people who do want to hear about it and then share things back and forth become your people.
Right.
But the first time somebody ever told me like you're kind of a know-it-all, I was like crushed. I mean, I was like 6 or something. We're talking
Right.
very young, but I was like crushed to realize that the concept of a know-it-all is even a thing.
Right.
Like, doesn't everybody want to understand everything all the time? And the answer is yes, humans do want to understand things, but the nature of knowledge acquisition and construction and sharing is fraught. And so we all develop weird hangups about it, and thus
Mhm.
everything you've just talked about. So my learning is on the flip side of that. Even though I do not have a PhD and I am not a practicing scientist or in the
Mhm.
world of academia, I feel very comfortable and fluent in that world. And so that part has never intimidated me from somebody like as if I'm on the outside of the ivory tower. I feel like I can just open the door and walk right inside and climb right up. And that's because I
Mhm.
have the privilege of tools and training and background or whatever. The aha for me is when I leave the ivory tower and I walk out into the field and go to do my work, I feel like I'm of the people. So
Mhm.
to learn at different points in my practice over the years that even as an adult, no one's calling me a know-it-all anymore because I've worked very hard to not be a know-it-all. But I do think that it came as a surprise earlier in my career to recognize people do still find, even at the level that I'm translating some of this stuff, they either find it intimidating or they find it still abstract and esoteric, and that they, through whatever reason, doubt their own ability to make sense of it. which is not always a me problem. Speaking of me and them problems,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also not a them problem. It's a systemic, interconnected relational issue. So I don't know how helpful it is for folks to hear this side of the learning. But if you are someone who identifies a little bit like me as someone who can use the jargon, does know all the references, studied the physics
Mm-hmm.
and the philosophy at a young enough age that I am, a fluent speaker of those, and it's not an acquired language. It's like a native language for me. I feel like that's a gift to me, but I also had to realize that not everybody wants to engage in that way. And to help avoid others being intimidated by me, there are things that I can do. Not because I'm so smart and so great, but just because the ideas I'm trying to share are intimidating, and the intimidation gets tracked, or, the residue of it attaches to me, or it attaches to work I do, or to ways we collaborate. So from the side of the intimidators, Kyle,
Uh-huh.
don't be so intimidated. And
Yep.
also, know that I think what happens is everywhere you look on this like imaginary ladder, which isn't even really a ladder, maybe it's a gradient from industry or practice or in the weeds, whatever, all the way up to like academic theory across some kind of non-value laden horizontal gradient. Everybody here looks to the person to their right and thinks, I don't know if I can hang with you. And this person looks to this person on their right and is like, I'm not sure I'm welcome or I can hang with you. And everybody looks to the left like we're of the people, right? And I think there's a level of kind of this I don't know, everywhere you go, either one step to the right or one step to the left, everyone both feels intimidated by what's to their right and might be intimidating the people to their left in this imaginary abstract gradient scale.
Hmm.
Remembering to look both ways. Who am I making feel very welcome, and who am I intimidated by? But then recognizing that you can slide or expand where you occupy that gradient slider. Yeah.
You just reminded me of something interesting. So when when I started my career in the music and movie world, I had to work with some celebrities here and there, and I
Do
made an
tell.
early decision for whatever reason. And I'm like 19. I don't have any wisdom. I just decided I'm going to treat people like people. And I'm not going to like fawn over anyone. Even people that I really wanted, and the people that I wanted to fawn over were not like, I want uh, like Steve Albini. I'm like a huge Steve Albini fan. Like I want to go like just tell me stories, Steve Albini. Like nobody else knows who Steve Albini is. You know who Steve Albini is,
I
but like
do.
yeah, like I want to like hear stories from Steve Albini, but like few
Everyone's
people in
previously like Googling who the hell is Steve
yeah,
Albini.
exactly. One
Look,
of my favorite producers, but that's but he's somebody that would want to just be treated like some random guy
yep.
is also it. So like I made a conscious decision, anyone I bump into I'm just going to treat like a random person, and if they're okay with that, that's sort of my litmus test for this is a
Mhm.
decent human being. If they're put off by being treated like a human being, that they
And they're dead
expect
to you.
more than that, then they're a dick. Yeah. I never applied that to the academics in that space, but maybe that's a good rule of thumb for any of us,
Yep.
realistically, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Everybody kind of just ends up somewhere on that scale, whether they mean to or not, as a function of how
mhm.
society places them based on their training or their background or whatever other status. And I also will share, maybe piggybacking on everything you just said too. I once did, we should probably save conversations about like personality frameworks and other nonsense for like
Right.
another like
Yeah.
self-contained part of the chat. But I once did a like a survey assessment thingy. I do these and collect them like out of they're like it's like someone who collects records or something. Like it doesn't mean that there's a lot of rigor behind most of them, but it's kind of a fun little thing. Anyway, I did one that was actually meant to be not an assessment of your own personality or traits or whatever, but actually it was meant to represent how others see you. And it was, it's supposedly based on a lot of research. The woman who developed this system supposedly did like tons and tons and tons of interviews and develop, like there's rigor behind it in that sense, but not in the sense that we all actually look for when we want to talk about science. So we'll come back to that. But regardless of this being no better than like which Harry Potter house are you in, or like, you know, which Star Wars character are you, or whatever,
Right.
that's about the level of respect I give most of these. But nonetheless, I did this with a few other people, and it was meant to kind of assess through a couple questions that it asks you. Like you just answer honestly, and it goes, here's how other people see you, or here are the aspects of you that other people find fascinating. And I did it, and I was like, this is BS. And I got a result that said, I forget what the actual two, they give you like two adjectives, but it was basically like power, and I think it's like confidence and innovation or something. For me, basically the two words were like something that had to do with creativity or innovation, and then one that had to do with like power. And I saw the word power and I was like, what? But it meant confidence. And one of the things it said was, you know, there's like the kind of light and dark side of these things. And the dark side was that like intimidating. And I was like, what? And I thought the whole thing was BS. And when we all shared our results with each other, every single other person that I've shared this with looked at my results and was like, oh my God, yeah, that's you. And that's what was interesting to me. Forget the assessment, but having multiple people that I trust and who are open with me be like, oh yeah, they nailed you. And it wasn't like, wow, you're an arrogant dick, Jen, but it was understanding that the level of confidence that I have in my own knowledge and the confidence I have in knowing exactly where my blind spots and gaps are, because there's lots of them and I know exactly what they are, so I can identify how little I know about a lot of things. That has the capability to intimidate people, and understanding that helps me be a better collaborator and a better partner. It helps me know exactly how to hold someone's hand through a process and also where to kind of push them. And that in turn reminds me of, and I was going to say this earlier in response to something and forgot, but this all kind of brings me back around to, again, thinking about the folks who might be listening to this and looking for some source of either comfort or insight or just to know they're not alone. When I used to teach physics, I would do the thing that most teachers would do at the beginning of the year, set out the rules of the room, set some cultural norms or whatever, to the extent that you can seed them. And I would often bring up that notion of there's no dumb questions, you know, and I would say, listen, physics in particular, perhaps more than any other subject you're going to learn in high school, is going to be a subject where you're going to hit a wall on something. You're going to have something just not make sense. That will happen to the brightest of you, or the ones in here that you're sure won't happen to. You will have questions. And then I would say, and your other teachers are going to tell you there's no dumb questions. And I'm here to tell you, yes, there effing are. There are dumb questions. There are questions that are going to reveal your ignorance. And there are questions that I will have literally just given the answer to, and you will have missed it. There are questions that when you ask them, some people are going to go, oh, thank God she asked that. There are also questions everyone else in the room, when they hear you ask it, are going to be like, what a moron. And the key is not to convince people that, oh, don't worry, if you're wondering something, at least a few other people probably are. Yeah, fine. There are going to be plenty of times where you are the only person in the room who doesn't get something. And the superpower activates when you just ask the question anyway. And it is so, so important. I wish I could instill that level of, I don't know if it's confidence, because I think sometimes it's more like bravery or brashness, or just close your eyes and do it when you're afraid and raise your hand anyway. I wish I could instill that in every single person I encounter, especially when they start diving into something, whether it's complexity science or otherwise, and they are intimidated by, or in some ways just daunted by the material. So I'm not even talking about personalities, but that factors in. There are dumb questions, and there are things you're going to struggle with that other people don't struggle with. And you are going to make so much more progress if you work up the courage to find a way to ask those questions regardless. Sometimes it means doing some self-directed learning, and you don't want to ask a question out loud and you have to go pouring through materials or YouTube videos or whatever. Sometimes it's finding humans you feel comfortable asking in private spaces if you don't want to ask things publicly. And that is like that's maybe my other learning sort of answer, is like, that is the skill set that hyper supercharges anything else you want to try to do using any of the tools or methods that we talk about in this space. Now, here's a question that kind of sides in with all of this, because you mentioned a couple of times music, and particularly going all the way back to being the person who's like, you're doing it wrong. I wonder to an extent if you and I are people that that are more comfortable in a place of saying, I don't really get this and I want to learn more about this. Or, you know what, I don't mind reaching out to some random person and treating them like a normal human and not a rock star, because of some of the shared things we do have in our backstories around interest in music, interest in other forms of art or literature, and the communities around them that made it safe and even admirable to be anti-establishment and to be defiant. And I also, you and I both have sort of overlapping punk
Mm-hmm.
um and adjacent, music backgrounds. And I think about how things that were instilled in me at a very young age about questioning everything, questioning
Mm-hmm.
authority, questioning
Mm-hmm.
institutions, questioning practices,
Yep.
not as an identity, like that's what I have to always be doing, but just that why would you not, as a way of both stress testing and learning about what is malleable and what isn't, and what can evolve and what can't. And so, did we get a head start on being comfortable, questioning things,
Mm-hmm.
being defiant, operating with a level of freedom that maybe wasn't granted to us, but we just took it anyway? And so, like, who do I need to go back in time and thank
Right.
that
Yeah.
I learned these lessons young? But it's never too late. For those of you who
Yeah.
never listened to punk rock, it's never too late to become a punk in your career.
Yeah, I don't even know that I would consider questioning and defiance as two different things in most cases.
Well, questioning gets interpreted as defiance in some
Right.
context, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, as a Catholic, I can absolutely confirm
Yep.
questioning and defiance are very
Yep.
similar, easily confused.
Can I share
Um,
a story about that that I would
please,
never in a million years thought would be relevant here, and maybe it's not?
please.
I was also raised Catholic. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm atheist at this point in
Mm-hmm.
my life, have been for a long time, but atheist with a lowercase a,
Mm-hmm.
not the. It's my
Right.
whole identity. Um, but in the same way people talk about like, oh, I'm spiritual or whatever. There's all kinds of things we could talk about what is out there. Nonetheless,
Right.
I was raised Catholic and went through all of the sacraments up through confirmation. And I remember that
Same.
by the time, for me and for us, at least in the States, I don't know if this works everywhere, that would have been 10th grade when I
Mm-hmm.
would have been confirmed, which is kind of like the final step for an individual to really confirm their faith and say, I am a fully adult member of the
Adult.
Catholic
Right.
Church. Later on, you have sacraments around marriage and others. But anyway, I knew by that age, I knew by age 10, I was like, I don't really believe in this stuff. I don't, there's reasons why I'm questioning and I don't believe in this. And
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of personal, but I hope it makes sense for you why I'm sharing it. I remember getting to a point where I had said to my mom, I don't want to be Catholic and I don't want to go to CCD every week and I don't want to do this. And she basically said, I have a commitment to the church to raise you this way. You
Yep.
need to go all the way through until you
Oof.
are a confirmed Catholic, and then you can believe whatever you want. And I will never not love the irony of that statement. But I
Right.
was like, you know what? I'm not going to fight this because I'll actually gain more freedom by moving with the dispositional state and the energy of the system. So I just went along with it. Went to Catholic CCD, the stuff that kids go to every week, to kind of learn and be kind of indoctrinated into the church teachings. And then, went through confirmation, and I'm confirmed. I'm a confirmed Catholic, even though I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe any of it. But here's something that I will share. My mom, who taught CCD, she has 3 kids, so she kind of took turns teaching our
Mm-hmm.
various CCD classes each year, and she did the year I was getting confirmed. And there was a lesson that they had to teach where it was about that question of, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And we were kind of supposed to explore this really philosophical question and come to some conclusion that defends what are the church teachings. And part of that was that every class, there were like 6 or 7 little classrooms that met in the basement of the church for these classes. Each of them had their own teacher. We were all supposed to basically put God on trial and come up
Mm-hmm.
with like a decision. Now you can
Interesting.
imagine what they expect to happen. You work through things, you talk. It's like a bunch of 10th graders, so that's like 15-year-olds. And everybody's supposed to be like, well, bad things happen to good people
Oof.
because it's God's way of, teaching us things or whatever. It's all according to the plan. In my classroom, because I was the way I was, I fomented a little rebellion. And I was like, what if we find God guilty? Because frankly, it seems to me that what he is doing is da da da. I won't get into the details, but to my mom's credit,
I can imagine. Mm-hmm.
imagine being my mom. And there
Mm-hmm.
are like 6 or 7 other adults who are teaching classes. And all of these are each about to take turns going up on a little stage in front of the whole collection of 100 or so and saying the verdict and everybody's supposed to come to the place of why it's okay that God lets bad things happen to good people. And my mom looked at me, and we were kind of all as a group kind of like, yeah, here's why. We should find God guilty because of XYZ. My mom went, if this is what you guys want to do it. And she was like, it's your choice. We
Mm-hmm.
gave you the free will and the autonomy to come to whatever conclusion makes sense to you as young adults as part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
I still to this day don't know what was going on inside my mom's heart. I should probably go home and ask her this. Like, I know what she was thinking as far as just, you got to give these kids have to reasonably understand this stuff on their own terms. But
Mm-hmm.
we got up there and we were like, we find God guilty, and we got a big kick out of being a bunch of like little punks or whatever.
Awesome.
We weren't disrespectful, but the reason I bring
Right.
that up is because to this day, I actually think that's a really good example of where your instincts want to shape something,
Mm-hmm.
and your instincts want to, even if you know you can't like engineer them exactly, your instincts are still, if you have an outcome in mind, you have a goal or a target oriented approach, you're going to try to shape things. Okay.
Right.
My mom took her hands completely off the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
and she emphasized not the outcome, but that she wanted each of us to engage with these ideas authentically. And what ended up happening was, because we were afforded the freedom to do that, every single one of us in that class came out of that experience with a way deeper, more kind of meaningful, internalized understanding of what we were doing.
Yeah.
Now, I left the church because that was already where I was at. I mean, it wasn't like they lost me that day, but I would probably go on to say the other 8 kids in my little class probably engaged with these ideas in a deeper way. And I'm pretty sure all of them are still practicing Catholic. So,
Mm-hmm.
not that we're all trying to do complexity like the same as the Catholic Church is trying to be a church, but I don't know. That's something about what we were just saying reminded me of this, and the nature of defiance and the nature of questioning is not always necessarily something that is trying to dismantle an institution. In my case,
Yeah.
I was, but what was little old me going to do? But think about what that freedom of movement afforded everybody in that case.
I love that. I just heard somebody say not too long ago, and I love this, and it stuck with me. It was that's the opposite of faith is not doubt. Doubt is an exploration. The opposite of faith is control. And
Yes.
yeah,
Bingo.
absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's
So
so core to complexity informed practice.
right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like, and yeah, I could not disassociate questioning with defiance. Um, at again Catholic school, so like asking questions in school
Yeah.
was problematic. That
Yeah.
was go stand in the hallway kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually it just became like, kids, we don't have identities. We're told identities by authority. And so when
Mhm.
your identity is you ask questions and you're the kid that stands in the hall, eventually you just steer into it and go, great, now I'm going to ask all the like
Yeah.
punk ass questions that are going to get
Yeah.
me to stand in the hall because that's my place. I don't sit at that desk. I stand in the hall for asking all
The
the
hallway
questions. And
dwellers.
exactly. And, and I'm listening to Slayer on my Walkman in the meantime and
Yep.
kind of stuff. So the other part for me, and I think this is where we diverge a little bit, is I didn't get my ADHD diagnosis until I was 43, and so I didn't learn very well in school. I learned, but I learned on my own terms. I learned by sneaking books out of the library and stashing the encyclopedia and having a computer in the house that
Yeah.
didn't have access to things, but by like button mashing and
Yeah.
having like learning software at home and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And by just being curious and tinkering, taking things. I got a boombox for Christmas and taking it apart and so that it didn't work and like that kind of shit.
Mm.
So I did not learn by sitting and imprinting and regurgitating over and over again. I got by until middle school or so, and then it
Yeah.
started to slip. Um, so I had a distrust for learning institutions, but I learned how to trust my resourcefulness over
Mm-hmm.
time on how to learn. And music was actually part of that because I learned how to create electronic music first and then how to produce, and then knew that I could go to school for that and that I had some talent there, but didn't realize it was not just talent, but I learned how to learn that way. And so that's
Yeah.
why I focused there. But like, yeah, that was a core piece of it, as well as I taught myself how to learn, because
That's
I
so
was
key.
told that I didn't have a place
Yep.
in a learning institution or most other institutions, because
Yeah.
they didn't they didn't know what was wrong with me. I was misdiagnosed as being defiant, or being lazy, or
Were you
being
diagnosed with like oppositional
malcontent.
defiance?
You know,
Do you
right?
know that diagnosis? For our listeners, there's a particular diagnosis called oppositional defiance disorder. It might have some
Right.
more updated names,
Yeah.
but I always used to, when I would encounter that in young people in the
Hmm.
schools where I would teach, I always had such an interest in the nature of how we medicalize and pathologize certain
Right.
ways of questioning and being. But that's a
Yeah.
topic too for another time.
Yeah.
But learning how to learn is a really important topic. I think that, for people who came to the Complexity Lounge just kind of wanting to hear some tales from how this stuff happens in the real world and how to bring complexity science into your consulting practice or your team inside a company, it might not sound like that's a relevant concrete answer, but it's kind of the secret real answer is like, how do you learn, and how do you learn to learn? How did
Hmm.
you learn to learn, and how does that continue to evolve? Because whenever you and I talk to either each other or other people in this, growing, broadening
Yeah.
community, there are certain themes that even when we come from very different places, we share. And then there's such interesting divergent aspects to it that I feel like for most people, just getting more exposure to those stories is really valuable, which is one of the reasons we're doing this,
Yeah.
obviously.
Exactly.
This isn't all just us indulging the instinct as young kids to have a tape recorder
Right.
and be like, what do you think?
Right.
No, sir, I don't like it. Speaking of which, earlier we were talking about like you're doing it wrong.
Hmm.
Also, couldn't help but think of Ren and Stimpy and Mr. Horse, and it was,
Of
no,
course.
sir, I
Yes.
don't like it. So we might make that the motto or the mascot for all of this.
Yeah, I liked to keep the uh when Fiverr opened up, that was going to be my offering. Was, I can tell you you're doing it wrong, and my image was the two old guys in the
Yeah,
balcony from the Muppets.
yeah,
That
Waldorf
was
and
that was my
Statler.
gift to the world, Waldorf and Statler. Yeah.
That was interesting. Terrible, but interesting. They were quote of theirs. That's my life in general. I hope that's what they
Hmm.
say about me. That'll go on my tombstone. That was interesting. Terrible, but interesting. But so relatedly, I mean, I wonder if part of what I'm also hearing, and I don't know if we want to go down this cul-de-sac, but the neurodivergence piece of this is intriguing, and we've talked about it in little bits, you and I know it's
Hmm.
come up in other places. Folks have already probably heard. I was not, and I don't know if I am diagnosably neurodivergent. I don't
Hmm.
care. I did not struggle in learning environments, but I also didn't just imitate and parrot. I kind of had the dopamine opioid cycle of learning locked in my brain from a very young age, and maybe that comes from some other childhood experiences that we don't have to get into here. But there was a part of me that was addicted to learning from a very young age, so
Hmm.
that's the addict, instinct in me, which was let's go hit that dopamine cycle and keep learning new things. So some of it I was able to do within the formal learning structures, and a lot of it I did the same as you. We had an
Hmm.
encyclopedia at home. My mom had the Merck manual because she's a pharmacist, and I used to read the Merck manual on days I was home sick.
Nice.
So that's the
Hmm.
kind of nerd we're talking about. But I
Hmm.
suspect a lot of people who are listening to this or watching this can probably relate on some level to that.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would call that out and say, pay attention to that because there's a reason that there are aspects of how you learn and how you learned to learn that
Hmm.
also inform what you do now and where complexity science and all the adjacent things that we talk about, where that fits in. But it's also good to be self-aware and know that not everyone is the same. So for clients or collaborators or stakeholders that you are working with who don't relate to information or to learning the way you do, you've got to be wary of what you come at them with and how you do it. And so that ties back to everything you said earlier, but knowing yourself first makes this whole process a lot easier because then you can figure out where the differences might be. The differences that make a difference.
there's a whole other layer here that I'm reluctant to even open this massive can
We
of
can always
worms.
cut it out. So let's go.
Oh, good. Okay. So yeah, let's censor.
Put some
So
pauses in so it'll be easy to cut.
perfect. So there's also the fact that us punks, us divergent in so many ways. You and I and so many other people that find ourselves here, probably find themselves listening to this at the moment, um, are not currently being served by the spaces that they're in at the moment, which is also what's compelling to say, I'm sniffing around for something else.
Yeah.
And the people that we then have to go talk to say you're in a position of power right now are the ones that are currently being served by the status quo.
Yeah.
And that is, at the end of the day, the what we're up against in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so, and I think we talked about this last time, but it's not even necessarily that they're inhuman, that they're not able to see this or be relatable or anything like that. It's that this is in motion, and it's not necessarily that the people we're talking to are at the wheel, or even if they
Right.
are at the wheel, that they can stop this train that is out of control.
Right.
But this is the I've heard Kat Switell refer to this as the paradox principle, the privilege paradox, that the people in power are the least likely to people empowered to make change are the
Yeah.
least likely to enact any change.
Cool.
And this is who we're trying to compel to learn something new, adopt something different, take a risk. But there's for what?
Yeah. Yeah. Master's tools, master's house, et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that there's an aspect of, there's sort of two things that I watch a lot of people kind of conflate or confuse. And one of them is getting permission or getting others in a more powerful position to either open up spaces to make something possible to happen at like a larger scale, because I think that's born of just a desire for aspirational, desirable futures to emerge. Like that's a human thing. That's one thing. And then the other is like whether or not you as an individual are able to pull all of this knowledge about complexity or systems or design into your practice. And you know I don't know that I've ever even really stopped to kind of say out loud or honor the fact that like those really are really separate things. And you've got to, if you can tease them apart, you're going to have a lot more opportunity to do and affect things that you want to do and affect.
Right.
When you recognize it's not the oversimplified, like I know we said it on the previous segment, it's not like waiting for Superman to come save you. It's not that simple, but knowing what you've just said and understanding that first thing about wanting to see more humans and more businesses and more communities operate in a way that kind of understands complexity and doesn't fight it. Wanting that, I think, is great and noble. I want that too.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not tied up tightly with my work. And I know that sounds weird, but I consider my work very mission and purpose driven. And I find what I do very fulfilling, even though what I'm doing in my day to day 9 to 5 probably isn't, by most people's description, bringing about a world in which humans are
Right.
more complexly conscious. It's really working at this local level,
Yep.
and it's working with people who either are okay taking some small chances or who have found ways to just open up a little slack in their system and allow some new practices to happen, which again we can talk more. I know in an upcoming section we promise we're going to get into some real specific examples, and we'll do the whole talk me through a project from the first time you broached it all the way through. We will do that.
Right.
We will do that. But I think there might be some important reflection just to be had on the fact that these two things can be separate. And what I work on at a small level, yep, it's planting seeds. Yep, it's accomplishing something on a small scale. It feels nice. I still have to go home and despair that the world isn't changing at large, blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, I think they can be separate in ways that you won't ever really get to know where the connections come in. So I guess what I'm trying, actually, I think Brian Klaas's Fluke, he makes the whole point of his book and Fluke is that you control way less than you realize or want to think is true, but you actually have more influence than you could ever really know. And
Yeah.
so it's like swapping the desire for control or drive or engineer or effect, as in bring about, swap that out for influence, wiggle, nudge, modulate,
Yeah.
right? And that's, I don't know. I guess that probably is redundant with everything we've been saying, but I think teasing apart those two desires really just releases you from that need to convince or bring people along, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't free you from it totally, but
No, I think the seeds you were talking about before, like that alone, like where those go, what that actually means, you won't be there to see them.
yeah,
Ultimately, what that turns into, and what that becomes years from now, decades from now, who
yeah,
knows? And that's okay. That's something
yeah.
that's the absence of control piece that you have to be comfortable with and kind of be satisfied by. Actually,
Are we hypocrites right now because what we're doing is kind of amounting to telling people that they just need to like get comfortable with not having control and they should just have more uncertainty tolerance? Like quick check, are we the baddies? Are we the hypocrites here? Yeah, are we telling people to change how they think? Are we trying to change
I
mindsets
don't
right now, Kyle?
think so. Like we're talking about taking action, right? We're um, but yeah, right. We're talking about what action to take.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, the reason I call that out is because I think it's easy for someone to hear that in
mhm,
what we're saying. So here's our chance to say, no, this isn't about just give up control and let go. Yeah, do all
right.
that. That's actually
Yeah.
great. I highly recommend it from
Right.
like, whatever other type of spiritual practice you might engage in between
Right.
like, Buddhism or other Zen practices, Taoism, whatever. But like,
Hmm.
regardless, it's less about, oh, just decide you're okay with this. Like
Right.
anybody else in this field who does, works with behavior and attitude and stuff, the first thing you're going to learn, maybe this is another learning, is that I do fully agree with those who argue that the behavior goes first and then the mind and the attitude shift from there, if they're even going to shift. That doesn't mean you want to give up on actually trying to be persuasive or to seed those new attractors or have new
Hmm.
assemblages form or whatever way you want to think about it, because there is a role for that to play in the process. But I do think for anybody who's listening to us and being like, you guys are literally just telling me to like be chill about the fact that I can't convince anybody in my job to do anything related to this stuff. And I think part of it is less saying be chill and more of it is break some rules, ask some questions, do all the things Kyle mentioned in his earlier response about finding ways to just seed interest and become an attractor for people who want to hear and play a little more. And don't ask for permission to find small little places where you can meet and talk. That community building or weaving happens way, way earlier and precedes than the forming of a new universe that gives you complexity work and projects. And then you're using SenseMaker, or then you're doing this thing or that method or whatever. Like all of that is far preceded by simply creating those conditions by seeding them as a community weaver, or whatever verbs you want to use. So it's do stuff. It's
Yeah.
not just change your mind. There, I've saved the day. We're not hypocrites.
Thank you. We were talking about this a little bit on the Complexity Lounge. That I think when we trip over this stuff, our our response is, I found this super weapon, and I can now go solve these massive things. All of the existential crises, these nebulous things that have been haunting us forever. I finally am able to map it and understand it and tackle it. And that's not the case. We end up still, you're doing it wrong position. And we're not going to be satisfied by that. We're going to be trying to boil oceans. And really, what it takes is sometimes we have to go try that. So I'm not saying don't try that. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And so
Yep.
if you're
Yep.
stubborn as I am, I suggest go learn it the hard way. Don't let me stop you. But what I learned, and what you may learn too by going through that, is that the real power that you've discovered is that the small moves have big impact. And this works, like you were just saying, in a very localized way, in a very effective way, and to just live it. is where this is really rich beyond the I can finally boil oceans now. This is not a sandwich board to go ring a bell around.
Yeah, I love that. This might be a good place to pause,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm looking at the clock and other things.
Yeah.
We can also, um, well, there is the question about time. So I almost kind of want to talk a little bit about that, but I actually wonder if we wait. And I was looking at the question we didn't quite get to: how do we measure and sense system change in practical ways beyond sense maker? I actually think there's a lot of good answers we can give to that, but I almost wonder if they come in as part of the conversation
Yeah.
about practical examples. So
Let's
maybe
do
we
that
make
next time.
the next week,
Yep.
we'll move that question and we'll do that cluster. Like, let's just, and then we can just, like I said, in that case, like I'm prepared to talk about how I even scope things. Like, we can give like kind of a longer,
Mm-hmm.
slightly more concrete take of a project or something from each
Yeah.
of us. And then we can look at the stickies and answer the specific angles on each of them.
I like it.